My name is Corporal Brandon Larry, USMC, Platoon 3115, MCRD, San Diego, no longer active duty. I'm making this video to bring justice for my father, Larry Brandon Sr., who, after surviving at least one attempt on his life in his home, located at 3181 Foster Ferry Road, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, was ultimately murdered in a very sophisticated and malicious premeditated conspiracy to commit murder to wrongfully acquire an Heir estate. This conspiracy to commit premeditated murder spanned through several states, involving multiple people, which had to be covertly authorized by the highest level of government within Tuscaloosa, Alabama, giving my Aunt Nancy Littles, her two stepsons, Tony and Kurt Littles, and my brother Daniel Brownlee the ability and resources to mastermind a plan to kill my father, Larry Brownlee Sr., while hospitalized. Before I show you in chronological order indisputable incriminating evidence proving this heinous, complex conspiracy to commit murder against my father, Larry Brownlee Sr., first I need to give you some background information about my family, specifically how my grandmother Mary Morgan migrated from Chicago, Illinois to Tuscaloosa, Alabama to purchase the land in question. Then shortly thereafter, my Aunt Nancy Littles, along with her family, migrating. Next, my brother Daniel Brownlee followed suit, and ultimately my father moved from Chicago, Illinois to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where he was murdered. My grandmother Mary Morgan gave birth to two children, my father Larry Brownlee Sr. and my Aunt Nancy Littles. My father Larry Brownlee Sr. was born February 17, 1953 in Chicago, Illinois. At around 1974, my father met my mother Johanna Gross and they fell in love and got married. My mother conceived me in 1974 and I was born March 6, 1975 in Chicago, Illinois. September 1975, my mother conceived my brother Eric James Brownlee and he was born May 23, 1976. My brother Daniel Brownlee was born 2 years later, August 6, 1978. Sometime approximately in 1978, while we were living at my grandmother's home located at 5482 South Everett in Chicago, Illinois, while my father was working and my mother and little brother Daniel were sleeping, my brother Eric and I were up early unsupervised playing with fire. We accidentally started a fire behind the living room bar, and within seconds the living room was engulfed in flames. I immediately rushed to wake up and save my mother and little brother, and we were all able to make it out safely. The house was a total loss, and everyone had to relocate. My father and mother decided to relocate to Humboldt Park, Chicago, Illinois. Soon after moving to Humboldt Park, my little sister Leanna Brownlee was born, and Humboldt Park, Chicago, Illinois, is where me and my siblings were raised after the fire. After my grandmother, Mary Morgan, received the homeowner's insurance money from the fire, sometime around 1980, she decided to relocate to Tuscaloosa, Alabama from Chicago, Illinois, where she purchased her dream home on an 11-acre farm, where, with the help of my Uncle Albert, she was self-reliant, growing acres of produce, raising cattle and livestock, living off the land. Every summer from approximately age 5 to my preteen years, my father and mother would take me and my siblings to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, dropping us off to help my grandmother out for the summer with the daily chores of maintaining the farm. Over the years, me and my grandmother developed a very special relationship, and she would often mention to me how she wanted me to come down and go to college at one of the Tuscaloosa, Alabama universities. As the years went by, sometime around 1990, I believe, I'm not exactly sure of the year, my Aunt Nancy Little was caught in an attempt murder case in Chicago, Illinois, after shooting someone. After she beat the case, she and her family hurriedly fled to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I'm guessing to avoid the repercussions of shooting whoever she shot. Shortly after they fled, my youngest brother Daniel also relocated from Chicago, Illinois to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. In 1994, I graduated from high school. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in life. Approximately 1995, my father stressed to me that he had to move to Tuscaloosa, Alabama because his mother, my grandmother, needed help. He informed me that she informed him that someone was stealing cattle off her property, so my father left for Tuscaloosa, Alabama shortly thereafter. In 1996, I decided to enlist in the United States Marine Corps and shipped out to MCRD San Diego Boot Camp May 27, 1996. I successfully endured boot camp and earned my AGA, becoming a United States Marine. Next, I went to MCC, Marine Combat Training, then to my MOS, Marine Occupation School, which was 6114 Huey and Corbett Attack Helicopter Mechanic School at Camp Pendleton, California. After graduating from my MOS school, I was assigned to Marine Corps Air Station HMLA 269, Jacksonville, North Carolina, where I had the honor to be around some of the finest men the Corps had to offer. May 27, 2000 was my AS, end of active service, and I honorably discharged from the United States Marine Corps, where I began transitioning into the civilian world where I ran into some legal problems. I resolved my legal troubles in 2006 and started attending colleges to ultimately earn a liberal arts associate's degree from Prairie State Community College. However, in 2007, my grandmother Mary Morgan became suddenly ill and died. After she died, blood began spilling in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It all began when my father called me from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Chicago, Illinois, to inform me that my youngest brother Daniel Brownlee had been shot in the back with a 6-inch nail from a pneumatic nail gun. I asked my father, how the fuck did Daniel get shot in the back with a nail gun? My father's response was he had no idea. I informed him that I would be there the next day. The next day, I arrived at my brother's DCH hospital room to find a man named Coon in my brother's hospital room. Coon had informed me that he had accidentally shot my brother while descending a ladder with a nail gun. which is physically impossible. However, no charges were filed. The next incident happened approximately in 2011-2012. My father called me informing me that he had just been released from Tuscaloosa, Alabama police station and that he had just killed a man in self-defense in his home located at 3181 Foster Ferry Road, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He informed me that he, my Uncle Albert, along with another man, were having morning coffee. When he excused himself to go to his room for his oxygen treatment due to COPD, when my father left to his room, the unknown man walked outside and grabbed a pipe wrench on the porch. He returned, viciously striking my Uncle Albert in the head, resulting in multiple staples. Albert was able to escape the man and the house. Then the unknown man went after my father. However, my father, during the commotion, retrieved his weapon and shot the man 7 times in self-defense, ending the threat. I asked my father, "What the fuck is going on out there? Do you need me to come down there?" And his response was, "No, I'm all right." What I didn't know then, but I know now, was that my dad was trying to protect me from what was transpiring in Tuscaloosa, Alabama concerning the land. September 19, 2013, my father called me to notify me that he had been admitted into Tuscaloosa, Alabama DCH Hospital ICU department. I immediately informed my father that I would be there as soon as possible, no later than a week. However, every day after that September 19, 2013 cell phone call from my father, until the day I arrived at Tuscaloosa, Alabama DCH Hospital, somebody was driving my brother Daniel Brownlee to DCH Hospital so that they can use my father's cell phone every day to call me, informing me that my father was not going to make it and tracking my movements from my aunt, to include calling me every 15 minutes after Daniel learned I was an hour away. I arrived at Tuscaloosa, Alabama DCH Hospital from Chicago, Illinois, approximately September 27, 2013. And as I hurriedly walked into my father's hospital room, I stopped frozen in shock after being told by my brother Daniel Brownlee for weeks straight that my dad was dying. Silently, I mentally analyzed my father's current condition as I observed my father sitting upright in his bed, watching TV, sipping on a Pepsi while simultaneously talking on his cell phone. Scanning the room, I noticed my brother Daniel sitting in a chair in the corner waiting for me to arrive. Immediately, I walked up to my father, ignoring my brother Daniel in shock. I told my father, "What the fuck is wrong with Daniel? You're not dying." My father's first response was, "You know how your brother Daniel is." Then, mysteriously, 20 minutes after I arrived at my father's bedside, my Aunt Nancy Littles, my father's sister, who I have not seen or spoken to in over 30 years, knowing that I had just arrived, walked into my father's hospital room along with Dr. Susan Margaret Moore. Inconceivably, the only reason for my Aunt Nancy Littles and Dr. Moore's unannounced surprise visit was a premeditated, malicious attempt to try and convince me that there was only one option for my father, desperately trying to persuade me to give them authorization to kill my father the very first day I arrived with a death shot. Enraged after finding out what they were both talking about, I kicked them both out the room immediately. October 18, 2013, after being with my father for almost a month, I had to leave Tuscaloosa, Alabama to return to Chicago, Illinois to attend a court date at Markham, Illinois courthouse, October 21st, 2013. I was currently out on bond outside the state of Illinois without permission because there was no time under the circumstances to wait for permission. So calling the courts to inform them of where I am and that I needed continuance without the question. Coincidentally, my father called me the morning of October 18, 2013, informing me that he had been transferred to Nolan Healthcare. After making a quick visit with my father the morning of October 18, 2013 at Nolan Healthcare, I left Tuscaloosa, Alabama at about 12 p.m. after calling my father and informing him that I was getting on the road. After several hours of driving en route to Chicago, Illinois, I received a call from my cousin Kurt Littles. Kurt wanted to confirm if I had left Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which I informed him that I did. However, after receiving that cell phone call from my cousin Kurt inquiring if I had left Tuscaloosa, Alabama, all cell phone communication between my father and I stopped because I believe my father was either already dead or soon going to be dead. After attending my October 21st, 2013, 9:30 a.m. court date and given a continuance, as I left the courthouse, I had this extremely eerie feeling as I ran to my car to call my father. Once I arrived at my car, I hurriedly jumped in and frantically made 2 unsuccessful attempts to call my father, which went straight to his voicemail, as all the previous attempted calls had been going since I left Tuscaloosa, Alabama on October 18, 2013. Shockingly, on the third attempt to call my father's cell phone, a nurse answered my father's phone, rudely informing me that my father was dead. After going Marine Corps berserk on this woman after being informed that my father was dead, I hung up on the unknown woman who answered my father's cell phone October 21st, 2013, informing me that my father was dead, and immediately called my cousin Kurt Littles. When Kurt answered, I immediately informed Kurt of what I just learned from the nurse. Incredibly, after my cousin Kurt answered his cell phone and I informed him of my father's death, my cousin Kurt shouted as if he was genuinely surprised. "What do you mean your father's dead?" he said. My cousin Kurt continued shouting, "How could your father be dead when me and my mom, Nancy Littles, were just at the hospital with him when he was alive?" Kurt continued stating that his mother, Nancy Littles, along with my younger brother Daniel, had just left my father's house cleaning it up, getting it ready for him to come home, which at the time made no sense to me if my father was already dead. I informed my cousin Kurt that I needed to gather up some money and that I would be driving back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama the very next day, October 22nd, 2013. The evening of October 22nd, 2013, I started my trip from Chicago, Illinois back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And during my trip back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I received a total of two cellular calls from my cousin Kurt. The first call from my cousin Kurt was to confirm if I had left Chicago, Illinois, which I informed Kurt that I had left. Somewhere in Tennessee at around 3 a.m., I pulled into a rest stop to get some rest. As soon as I fell asleep, I was awoken by my cell phone ringing. It was my cousin Kurt calling me a second time to inform me that he had just learned that my father was put into restraints, which contradicted my cousin Kurt's earlier statement, October 21st, 2013, of him being with my father while he was still alive. Wide awake from my cousin Kurt's disturbing call, I got back on the highway, desperately trying to get back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. About an hour after my cousin Kurt called, my older cousin Tony called, and Tony Little's only purpose for calling me was to try and persuade me in these exact words to think about the money and to burn my father's body. In shock, without a word, I instantly hung up on Tony, thinking to myself, who is this, the devil? Absolutely certain that foul play existed with my father's death, I drove in silence, contemplating my next moves. Once I arrived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, October 23rd, 2013, I contacted my cousin Kurt and we met at his home. As I walked into Kurt's house, he informs me that he had made withdrawals from my father's bank account, closing my father's bank account. I later learned after receiving my father's letters of administration that my Aunt Nancy, without being associated to my father's bank account, closed my father's bank account, leading me to believe that she had a forged power of attorney. Kurt then informed me that his mother, Nancy Littles, wanted to speak to me. Once we arrived at her home, the first words out of her mouth were, "I'm selling the land." Certain foul play existed. I quietly gathered all my father's medical records, covertly mailing them to attorney Deborah Lavender of the Birmingham, Alabama Cochran law firm. After Deborah Lavender received and reviewed my father's DCH hospital medical records, attorney Deborah Lavender immediately called me and informed me to go to law enforcement because crimes had been committed against my father, which positively confirmed my intuition of foul play and the murder of my father. Now certain that crimes have been committed against my father, I contacted Tuscaloosa, Alabama law enforcement. I was informed by the Tuscaloosa, Alabama Sheriff's Department to file a police report with the Tuscaloosa, Alabama Police Department first. So I went to Tuscaloosa, Alabama Police Department and spoke with Officer Panrod and filed police report 131-207-109. Once I completed the report, I was then allowed to speak to Sergeant Dale Phillips of the Tuscaloosa, Alabama Sheriff's Department. I thoroughly explained to Sergeant Dale Phillips that not only did I believe my father was killed, but that this was their second attempt. The first being when an unknown individual, unknown to me, tried to kill both my uncle Albert James Pearson and my father. The double attempted murder occurred at my father's home on the Heir estate in question, located at 3181 Foster Ferry Road, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Tragically, my father, in self-defense of his life and my uncle's, ended the threat's life, which unfathomably, Sergeant Dale Phillips informs me that he was the lead investigator at my father's crime scene and that both Tony Littles and Kurt Littles were both at the crime scene. After thoroughly and chronologically explaining my allegations of murder to Sergeant Phillips, combined with tangible cell phone records that could have been subpoenaed and used as evidence corroborating foul play, two fraudulent withdrawals made from my father's bank account after his murder, my uncle Albert James Pearson's savings account being depleted by my Aunt Nancy purchasing a brand new Mercedes-Benz shortly after my father's murder. Then attorney Deborah Lavender informed me crimes had been committed against my father. Go to the police. Sergeant Phillips said he was going to subpoena hospital records, phone records, order an autopsy, and a toxicology report. However, there was never an autopsy or a toxicology report or a single subpoena sent out, and the case was closed. Because Tuscaloosa, Alabama, city government officials in collusion and assisted by Tuscaloosa, Alabama law enforcement, conspiratorially, knowingly, and intentionally with malice, did nothing but sweep my allegations with evidence under the rug, because Tuscaloosa, Alabama government officials' end goal was to eliminate my father, so that my Aunt Nancy Littles, the executive of the Heir estate, with the help of Tuscaloosa, Alabama government officials, law enforcement, the University of Alabama Law Department, and the Tuscaloosa, Alabama kangaroo court system, could maliciously and illegally start the procedures to force the sale of the Heir estate against my grandmother, my father's, and my wishes as well. Basically, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and the powers that be gave my Aunt Nancy Littles and all parties involved with this criminal conspiracy immunity. Then, with the help of the University of Alabama Elder Law Department attorneys, my Aunt Nancy Littles was able to fraudulently force the sale of the land against my wishes. And in doing so, my Aunt Nancy Littles, with the help of the Elder Law Department attorneys, prepared, signed, and submitted a fraudulent affidavit to the court, committing fraud upon the court, violating Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 60D3, fraudulently stating in the affidavit that my father's estate was never administered, which is fraud upon the court and voids all judgments made. I tried to fight and thought I found an attorney outside of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, to help me fight by the name of Derry R. Johnson. But after I explained what was going on to her and she agreed to take the case, emailing me the contract and instructing me to send $2,500 money order for a retainer fee, which I next day delivered. Then, after tracking the money order, I discovered the package had been returned, and in my email was a letter of non-engagement from Miss Johnson, basically quitting, and ultimately the land was ordered by the courts to be sold. Never giving up, I contacted Captain Hood, I believe was his name, from Tuscaloosa, Alabama Sheriff's Department. Captain Hood told me he would start an investigation if I had Daniel call him, telling him that he had witnessed my Aunt Nancy and Dr. Moore try to kill my father the day I arrived. I went and informed Daniel what Captain Hood had said, and immediately Daniel's facial expressions changed. Suddenly, Daniel started denying being in my father's hospital room when I arrived. Daniel also denied witnessing or hearing anything that was said by my Aunt Nancy or Dr. Moore, when Daniel absolutely was in the room when all this transpired. However, 2 years later, I was able to get a video confession of Daniel admitting to being there and witnessing it. However, I want to caution you that the video has vulgar language.
Can you hear it?
What's wrong?
Yeah? Oh, now, what shot, Daniel? What shot? Because they weren't talking about hospice, but they were talking about shot. What shot, Daniel? What shot? No, they weren't talking about hospice, nigga. They weren't talking about hospice, nigga. What shot you talking about, Daniel? Huh? Now we're getting closer. Now you see, we're getting closer. Now we're getting closer. Now there's a shot. First there was no shot. He didn't know nothing about a shot. Now it's a shot. Nigga, nah, nigga. Hello, hey, I'm still out here south, bro.
Hey, Daniel, what was the shot about, bro?
I'm still out
I want to know what the shot was about, bro. Okay, what was the shot about, bro?
What shot, Daniel?
Some in the hospital where you just don't feel nothing and you just go slip.
What does that mean? Wait. What does that mean?
I feel like still.
What does that mean, bro? Hey, hold on. What does that mean, bro? Wait. No, I'm asking you a question. Don't change nothing up. I'm asking you, what does that shot mean, bro? That shot.
They didn't quite explain it.
What did you say? They didn't explain it.
They said it was a shot.
I called Captain Hood and informed him of the video that I had, and Captain Hood told me that wasn't good enough, that I have to come down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You see, all parties involved with this criminal conspiracy to commit murder never factored Corporal Brownlee into the equation. My Aunt Nancy Littles was convinced and convinced those involved that I was just like my brother Daniel, a crack cocaine addict that could be easily dealt with. That is until I hired attorney Sanford E. Gunter in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to open my father's estate, granting me letters of administration over my father's estate, giving me access to all my father's records to include his consumer cellular phone records, which my father's cell phone records were the evidence that I needed to prove foul play existed, and they knew that. But they also knew they had time to clean up loose ends, making everything convoluted before I was able to obtain the letters of administration. I received my father's letter of administration over his estate June 26, 2015, and I immediately requested his consumer cellular call logs for the months of September and October 2013. Once I received and reviewed my father's call logs, instantly, without a doubt, I knew they were altered, because not only was my father's initial cell phone call to me informing me that he was hospitalized September 19, 2013 missing, which initiated my travels from Chicago, Illinois to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, but so were the week of cell phone calls starting September 19, 2013 through September 27, 2013 until I arrived missing, which were made from my father's cell phone by my brother Daniel, tracking me from my Aunt Nancy. Also missing from my father's consumer cellular call logs was the cellular evidence that my father's cell phone was answered October 21st, 2013, allegedly by a nurse who informed me that my father was dead, which initiated my travels back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama from Chicago, Illinois, October 22nd, 2013. Plus, there were over 17 days of cell phone interaction with my father missing from my father's consumer cellular call logs. Does it seem plausible that my father was hospitalized September 19, 2013, and for 17 days until October 6, 2013, he calls everyone but his firstborn son? And that's the reason why my father's cell phone records were never subpoenaed by law enforcement, because Tuscaloosa, Alabama law enforcement was covertly working in collusion with the guilty parties involved within this criminal conspiracy, protecting and giving all parties involved sufficient time to alter the call logs, because the call logs were the incriminating evidence that I needed to substantiate what I was saying, and would confirm and corroborate in chronological order everything I've been saying for years, so they had to be altered. To hide my father's initial cell phone call, September 19, 2013, notifying me of his hospitalization, then Daniel calling me every day after that until I arrived September 27, 2013. from my father's cell phone, tracking my movements to Chicago from my Aunt Nancy. And finally, my father's cell phone being answered by a nurse October 21st, 2013, telling me my father was dead. Proving that my father was dead October 21st, 2013 or sooner. Changing the narrative of when my father died and exposing their fraudulent paperwork and death certificate. The culprits in this criminal conspiracy had to also erase and alter cellular communication on my end, deleting all records of my father's incoming cell phone calls September 19, 2013, to include the continuous cell phone calls from my brother Daniel made from my father's cell phone, which not only proved they were tracking me from Chicago, Illinois to Tulsa, Alabama, but also that a nurse answered my incoming call from cell number 726-2945 made to my father's consumer cellular cell phone October 21st, 2013, informing me he was dead. Then after being informed of my father's death, I immediately called my cousin Kurt's cell phone October 21st, 2013. Kurt answered and informed me when I called him that he and his mom were just with my dad alive. They also had to get rid of the cellular phone evidence of Kurt calling me the early morning of October 23, 2013, while I was en route to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, with contradicting statements of my father being in restraints, when just a day earlier, Kurt had stated that he and his mother Nancy were with my father alive. Then shortly after Kurt's call, my cousin Tony calling me, attempting to try and convince me to think about the money and let's just burn my father's body. After discovering the cellular fraud, I immediately called Consumer Cellular, making them aware of my accusations of cellular fraud, which I was told was impossible. Knowing Consumer Cellular employees were wrong, I turned to my previous cell phone company, Verizon Wireless, in hopes of getting my call logs to prove that foul play existed on my end of cell phone communication. However, this is where it gets even crazier, because for 7 long years I argued and fought with Verizon Wireless to get my cell phone call logs for cell number 726-2945. And for 7 long years, I was told by Verizon Wireless customer service agents a myriad of excuses on why they could not locate my call logs, to include that I was not the primary account holder of account number 386-591-070, and that I needed authorization from Jacqueline Ferris. So I contacted Jacqueline Ferris, and we both contacted Verizon Wireless together, giving me authorization to the account. And even then, Verizon Wireless informed me that they were unable to locate my call logs for cell number 726-2945. Undeterred and certain that the call logs existed for my Verizon Wireless cell number 726-2945, I spent years and countless hours dealing with Verizon Wireless customer service agents until I learned the Verizon Wireless Executive Relations Department. I started contacting them through phone and email daily, informing them of the cellular fraud that was going on with the missing call logs. I was then contacted through a phone call by a representative of Verizon Wireless Executive Relations Department named Renee. Upon explaining to Renee the situation of the missing call logs, Renee immediately began talking to me very condescendingly on the phone for approximately an hour and a half, trying to convince me that I'm stupid and that I never had a cell number 726-2945 ever. Renee was extremely adamant that there was absolutely no records of that number ever existing in Verizon Wireless database. Unfathomably, Renee continued to state that the actual number that I had during the time frame in question, according to him, was 962-7216. After reaching my breaking point dealing with Renee's blatant lies, I emailed Renee 2 PDFs of my father's September and October 2013 consumer cellular call logs as we spoke on the phone. After verifying that Renee received the email that I sent to him, I then asked Renee if I didn't have cell number 726-2945 ever, then why does the number appear multiple times in my father's October 2013 consumer cellular call logs? Renee's response was that my father was calling that number, but since I didn't have that number, it still marked it as called or some bullshit to that effect. Baffled of what I was being told by Renee, I kept pushing harder to find the missing call logs, positive they existed. Renee, obviously frustrated and tired of dealing with me, finally told me, okay, I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to send you Jacqueline Ferris's call logs from August through October 2013. Renee also said he was going to send me my call logs from cell number 962-7216 of the same months with them, which was Renee and the culprits of this criminal conspiracy's fatal mistake. I don't ever deny having cell number 962-7216. However, as I informed Renee, I wasn't assigned that number until Jacqueline Ferris took me off her account as a secondary account holder December 1st, 2013, yet impossibly starting October 6, 2013, both cell numbers 726-2945 and 962-7216 simultaneously on the same day appear in my father's consumer cellular call logs for October 2013. Renee mailed me the call logs in March of 2022. And when I received them, I meticulously and thoroughly reviewed them page by page and discovered hidden within Jacqueline Ferris's call logs the proof that I needed. After thoroughly reviewing and analyzing hundreds of pages from Verizon Wireless call logs that I received from Renee, Not only were there 2 months of call logs from July and August 2013 from my cell number 7262945, proving that I had this number, but also proving that someone within Verizon Wireless was an accessory to the criminal conspiracy, fraudulently hiding my call logs, aiding and abetting the culprits in this conspiracy to commit murder against my father. Adding to the evidence proving a criminal conspiracy exists within Verizon Wireless is the email was sent by Verizon Wireless Executive Relations Department Supervisor Tracy G, which was sent to me March 17, 2022 at 1:14 a.m., well after business hours, approximately 2 weeks after Renee, who works in the same department, sent me contradicting evidence hidden within Jacqueline Ferris's call logs. In Supervisor Tracy G's email, it clearly states that cell number 7262945 returns no records of ever existing in their database, and that cell number 9627216 wasn't active until December 1st, 2013. Yet, 2 weeks earlier, Renee said the exact opposite. Renee said that the number I had during my father's hospitalization was 9627216 and sent me 2 months of call logs as evidence to support his accusations. Renee also ironically sent me the evidence I needed disproving Tracy G's email. I later got a chance to speak with Tracy G, and after his email, and while I was on the phone with Tracy G, I emailed him documented proof with supporting evidence of the Verizon Wireless call logs, proving my cell number 7262945 existed, disproving his earlier email to me and proving cellular fraud. After Tracy G received and read the email that I sent him, the only question that I had for Tracy G was, where are the September and October 2013 call logs for cell number 7262945? After Tracy G got caught red-handed with his blatant lies trying to hide the cellular fraud, with documented Verizon Wireless call out that the number existed, sent to me 2 weeks earlier by his Verizon Wireless subordinate, Renee. Also, after Tracy G personally emailed me saying that the number didn't exist within the Verizon Wireless database, which, unknown to Tracy G, contradicting evidence was sent to me 2 weeks earlier by Renee, his subordinate. Tracy G then says to me that he would have to check into the Verizon Wireless archives, but he couldn't guaranteed to me that he would be able to find them, claiming that too much time had passed, even though Renee, just 2 weeks earlier, had sent me proof that the number existed, retrieved from the same database archives that he was searching through. I brought this to his attention, and Tracy G had no response. Then Tracy G marked my case cease and desist, case closed. So after 9 long years of doing my own investigation single-handedly, never giving up on solving my father's murder till mission accomplished, and in totality of all the evidence that I have acquired, analyzed, and reviewed, I have discovered that this conspiracy was far more sinister than I had thought, with the conspiracy tentacles reaching my own home state of Illinois. So now I'm going to break my father's conspiracy to commit murder down, as we Marines say, shotgun style. I'm not exactly sure of the month when Jacqueline Ferris called me asking for a favor. It was either late July or early August of 2013 when Jackie called me begging me to watch her kid Hunter for the weekend. Jackie was adamant that she had an emergency and needed to leave town. She told me the fridge was full of groceries and she would give me gas to get there. Jackie also persuaded me by offering to buy me a pair of running shoes and an iPhone for the favor. At the time, I was in a bad financial position, and Jackie was offering me an iPhone and a pair of New Balance running shoes, so I agreed to watch her kid for the weekend. Once I arrived, Jackie informed me that she had ordered the iPhone. She gave me the tracking number, then left for the weekend. Jackie came back from her trip before the iPhone arrived, but when I received the iPhone that Jackie had purchased from me, I was assigned cell number 7262945. In March of 22, when I received and reviewed the call logs that Renee from Verizon Wireless had sent to me, I was so ecstatic after 7 years to finally find the missing call log from cell number 7262945, proving that I had the number, that I almost missed multiple key pieces of evidence covertly hidden within Jacqueline Ferris's Verizon Wireless call logs, which after discovering it, I was left utterly dumbfounded, enraged, and betrayed, but it all started to make sense now. I discovered within Jacqueline Ferris's Verizon Wireless call logs that cell number 8929690 attached to Jacqueline Ferris's Verizon Wireless business account 386591070 prior to my father being hospitalized September 19, 2013, starting August 23, 2013 through October 15, 2013, was covertly communicating with my family members in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, from multiple Verizon Wireless cell phone numbers attached to a Verizon Wireless business account. Jackie was calling my brother Daniel's cell number 205-826-8784 phone number, as well as calling my father's 205-239-9509 cell number on the 23rd and 28th of August 2013. Jacqueline Ferris also called my father's cell phone on September 9, 2013, which my father's call logs do not reflect that call. as well as multiple incoming and outgoing calls from my brother Daniel's 205-826-8784 cell number as well. Jacqueline Ferris was also calling my cousin Kurt Littles on September 26, 2013 at 7:43 p.m., as well as Tuscaloosa, Alabama DCH Hospital on September 26, 2013 at 7:49, where my father was hospitalized, which was the day before I arrived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, September 27, 2013, to be at my father's bedside. Then again on October 15, 2013, from cell number 892-9691, Jackie was communicating with my brother Daniel's friend Tony. Now let's get one thing crystal clear. Jacqueline Ferris has never been to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Jackie has never met or spoken to my father, my brother Daniel, or my cousin Kurt, so her number has no business showing up on any incoming or outgoing call to anyone in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, period. As a matter of fact, I never had any of my relatives' cell phone numbers, including Tony and Kurt, until after I arrived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, September 27, 2013, which proves there was a very sophisticated and meticulous planned criminal conspiracy to kill my father if the person knew Jacqueline Ferris had exchanged cell phone numbers so that Jackie had direct communication with my brother Daniel, DCH Hospital, and my cousins Kurt and Tony the month prior to my father being hospitalized and the day before I arrived at my father's bedside after he was hospitalized. I reiterate, Jacqueline Ferris had my relatives' cell phone numbers before I had any of their numbers. I believe when I was watching her kid Hunter for that weekend, Jacqueline Ferris flew down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama to make all the necessary arrangements to find out all the details of the premeditated plan of murder. So now that I have your attention and I brought you up to speed, this is what I strongly believe went down. In 1994, when my grandmother created a Heir estate excluding my Aunt Nancy's two sons because they were not blood, making sure to include her son, my father, and all his children, that created animosity, and I believe that was one of the first motivating factors, which began a malicious plot to get rid of the Bradleys. I believe the second motivating factor was Mercedes-Benz, which my cousin Tony Zills worked for. You see, when my father was murdered, Mercedes-Benz U.S. International, located in Vance, Alabama, which is approximately 19 miles from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, already had a storage facility on the backside of the land. Mercedes-Benz was trying to cut down on logistics, supplying the Mercedes-Benz dealership in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And for what I learned from my investigation was that Mercedes-Benz wanted to expand their storage facility. I believe my cousin Tony Littles, who at the current time worked for Mercedes-Benz, had first-hand knowledge of this, which was the second motivating factor for my Aunt Nancy Littles, the executive of the estate, and the powers that be to begin their takeover of the Heir estate, even if it meant killing her own brother or anybody else standing in her way. In their first attempt to kill my father, they used my brother Daniel to steal my father's guns in his home, making him vulnerable. Then they sent a killer to my father's home and failed miserably, trying to kill my father and Uncle Albert. So then they devised a more sinister plan to kill and get rid of my father. Again, they used my brother Daniel, who was a willing participant, to get my cell number out of my dad's phone. Daniel then passed my cell number to my relatives, who somehow through their Tuscaloosa, Alabama connections gained access to my cell phone carrier information. Through accessing my Verizon Wireless cell phone account information, they were able to ascertain that Jacqueline Ferris was the primary account holder. They then contacted her and propositioned her to be a co-conspirator with a financial number she couldn't refuse. Once she was on board, they devised a plan that she purchased me an iPhone, adding the iPhone to her Verizon Wireless business account where she was the primary account holder, so they would have total access to my cell phone's location and call logs. They then required Jacqueline Ferris to keep close tabs on me, reporting information back to them concerning my current situation and how I was doing financially, so that they can choose the perfect time to implement their evil plan, which Jackie, being an ex of mine and still remaining friends with me, knew my current situation and exposed to them that I was currently homeless and sleeping in my car. My Aunt Nancy and her two sons, thinking this was the perfect opportunity to put their plan in motion after discovering the information Jacqueline Ferris had provided to them, certain that I would never be able to make it to Tuscaloosa, Alabama homeless, initiated their malicious criminal conspiracy to murder my father within DCH Hospital, somehow aggravating my father's pre-existing condition to get him hospitalized, thinking once my father was hospitalized, they would be successful in completing their mission of killing him without any interference from me. However, as a precautionary measure, they informed Jacqueline Ferris if the need arises and I was able to make it to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, she should prepare for the contingency to travel in vehicle to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, making sure to make multiple cellular phone calls during her trip with her cell number 9627216, making it appear as if it were me traveling from Chicago, Illinois to Tuscaloosa, Alabama with that cell phone. Because if necessary, at a later time and date, they were going to alter and manipulate all records of incriminating cellular evidence that was made to and from my cell number 7262945, exposing their criminal conspiracy, making it appear that the cell number that I had all the time was the one Jackie was using, cell number 9627216. Once my father was hospitalized, they financed my brother Daniel's daily transportation to DCH Hospital, strictly instructing Daniel only use my father's consumer cellular cell phone to repeatedly call me daily, trying to visually convince me mentally that my father was dying, so that when my Aunt Nancy, Dr. Moore, hospital staff, and the powers that be murdered my father, their fabricated hospital notes and records would be consistent with their narrative, and I would be mentally left with only what they had Daniel leading me to believe. The fact that I unbelievably showed up unexpectedly, interfering with their murderous plan and time frame, made them panic and change tactics, trying to deal with me, the unexpected arrival. Their mistake was thinking I was like my brother Daniel, a crack addict, stupid enough to follow along with their murderous plan for drugs and monetary gain. And once I arrived, I discovered that Dr. Moore and my Aunt Nancy were trying to inject my father with a shot to kill him, immediately kicking them both out the room, then staying in my father's home in Tuscaloosa, Alabama for almost a month, constantly at my father's hospital bedside at DCH Hospital daily, running any errands that he requested. They soon discovered that they had extremely underestimated me. This made all parties involved desperate to finish the job and resort to an unplanned Plan B, which induced them into making careless mistakes in desperation, trying to work out a plan around me to kill my father. Immediately after I arrived, September 27, 2013, prolonging my father's murder, those involved started frantically fabricating documents in preparation to kill my father, anxiously awaiting my departure so that they can implement their plan. Registered nurse Lauren Wells and all others involved made sure to start documenting and notating a fabricated timeline, stating that she had called and contacted me several times starting September 29, 2013. Registered nurse Lauren Wells also notated that she had contacted my cousin Tony several times from my father's room to get a decision from Tony on my father's cold status. However, this is all false because I was never contacted by any hospital staff from DCH Hospital. Second, if there was no phone in my father's hospital room, and the only phone my father had access to was his personal cell phone, how did registered nurse Lauren Wells contact Tony from the hospital room telephone? Next, if I was present in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, September 27, 2013, why was I not made aware of any of this? And why would Tony, who was not blood, be asked to make any decisions on my father's life when I, his firstborn son, was there present in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, entering Tuscaloosa, Alabama DCH Hospital every day for almost a month to see my father? After I arrived, mysteriously, both my cousins wanted to exchange cell phone numbers with me, and in retrospect, the only reason for this was to keep close tabs on me, trying to learn my movements. They wanted to know how long I was going to be staying in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. My cousin Tony even incredulously inquired if I ever smoked rock cocaine before, because I was the monkey wrench standing in the way of their plan to murder my father. So now they had to work around me to kill my father, and they were desperately trying to find a way to get me out their way. My cousins learned that I had an upcoming court date, October 21st, 2013, in Chicago that I had to attend, and that I was leaving Tuscaloosa, Alabama, October 18th, 2013. After they discovered this information, all culprits involved started preparing hospital documentations in preparation to kill my father at Nolan Hospital after I left Tuscaloosa, Alabama. October 18, 2013, the day I was leaving Tuscaloosa, Alabama to go back to Chicago, Illinois for a court date, my father, using his consumer cellular cell phone, calls my cell phone informing me that he has been transferred to Nolan Hospital. After my father gave me his room number, before I left Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I went to go see my father at Nolan Hospital, which was located on the fourth floor of the same building as DCH Hospital. I hugged my father before I left Tuscaloosa, Alabama, heading to Chicago, Illinois, telling my father to hurry up and get out of here. I'll be right back after court. However, unknown to me was that Dr. Moore, my Aunt Nancy Littles, and her sons were patiently waiting for me to visit with my father and leave Tuscaloosa, Alabama, so they could quickly initiate their final attempt to kill my father before I returned from court. After reviewing thousands of DCH and Nolan hospital records, after personally being there with my father every day for almost a month, I discovered that DCH hospital staff, to include Dr. Moore, were fraudulently and criminally staging my father's death around me and my court date through paperwork, stating daily within the DCH hospital computer records that my father was essentially a dead man without his BiPAP at 100% O2 at 15 liters. When I absolutely disagree with that, having been with my father daily, watching him take his mask off hours at a time to eat Boston cream donuts and drink coffee daily. From Dunkin' Donuts, which he called me almost daily, asking me to grab him the donuts. My father told me that the Dunkin' Donuts were the only way he can guarantee getting the hospital staff to assist him when he needed it. Now, does that sound like a dying person? However, within their own fabricated DCH hospital notes, it shows that after I unexpectedly showed up at DCH hospital, ruining their initial plan to kill my father, the first week of his admittance into DCH ICU was planned under the guise that he was unable to breathe on his own. Their plan B was to transfer my father to Nolan Hospital after I left, which was owned and operated by Dr. Moore, where they would ultimately kill him. For example, October 11, 2013, at 11:45, it's notated in the DCH hospital notes. Dr. Salinas asked registered nurse Lacey Tubbs to have LTAC give my father an evaluation. October 11, 2013, at 17:33, registered nurse Lacey Tubbs notates in the DCH hospital records that she received a call back from Amy at LTAC, who stated they cannot accommodate my father at LTAC with a BiPAP at 100% O2 at 15 liters. Then October 16, 2013, at 15:08, 2 days before my departure, registered nurse Lacey Tubbs notates in the DCH hospital notes that my father remains on BiPAP at 100% O2, but now it's decreased to 12 liters. Then, within that same minute of time, October 16, 2013, at 15:08, at the request of Dr. Salinas, registered nurse Lacey Tubbs calls LTAC again to have my father reevaluated. October 17, 2013, at 13:34, 1 day before I have to leave to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, registered nurse Deborah Price notates that my father's goals have been met and decreased to 10 liters. 2 hours later, October 17, 2013, at 15:13, registered nurse Lacey Tubbs receives a call from Laura at LTAC saying now they can accept my father at LTAC tomorrow, October 18, 2013. Then on October 18, 2013, Lacey Tubbs notates that she received a call from Laura from LTAC stating they cannot admit my father until October 19, 2013, when I know this to be false and fabricated because I visited my dad in Nolan Hospital October 18, 2013. Then October 19, 2013 at 08, registered nurse Amy Galloway states my father has orders to be moved to LTAC. Then Dr. Moore, attempting to cover herself and her corporate crimes, personally alters my father's DCH ICU discharge summary date of discharge by maliciously and manually changing my father's discharge summary date in the computer, manually inputting the false date of discharge as October 19, 2013, attempting to hide my father's actual discharge date covering her crimes. Then, on page 3 of my father's DCH ICU discharge summary, due to the DCH ICU mainframe computer's default, the actual date of discharge shows the true date of October 18, 2013 at 14:59, and a date of transfer October 18, 2013 at 15:23. Dr. Moore, in furtherance of her crimes, altered my father's discharge date, giving Dr. Moore and her corporates more time to cover the tracks of murdering my father, manually scratched out with pen my father's original DCH hospital discharge date. As you can see, Dr. Moore scratched out today on my father's DCH ICU discharge order sheet. Then Dr. Moore penned in the false date of October 19, 2013 to make it appear that my father wasn't transferred from DCH ICU to Nolan until the next day. But because I made Dr. Moore and everybody involved in this conspiracy nervous while they were concocting a story around me with fabricating documents to support the narrative, in preparation to covertly conspire to murder my father while hospitalized, in a rush, Dr. Moore not only stupidly scratched out today's date on page 1 of the discharge order sheet, making sure to write in her own date of discharge of October 19, 2013 to cover herself, but incredulously, on page 6 of the same discharge order sheet, Dr. Moore signs and dates my father's discharge order sheet October 18, 2013 at 0830, the actual date my father was transferred. It's as if Dr. Moore, her staff, and my relatives were operating with immunity. There were no consequences for their crimes. So after my father called me on my cell phone from his cell phone, informing me that he had been transferred to Nolan Hospital October 18, 2013, after visiting my father at Nolan Hospital, then stopping at my father's home to gather my things, I called my father and told him I was getting back on the road. I'll be right back after court. He said okay, and we hung up and I headed back home to Chicago, not knowing that would be the last time I seen or spoke to him alive. Several hours en route to Chicago, Illinois from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I received a call from my younger cousin Kurt. Kurt was calling me to see if I had left Tuscaloosa, Alabama to Chicago for court, which I told him yes, I did. Immediately after my cousin Kurt had a confirmation that I had left Tuscaloosa, Alabama, they put their plan into action, as you can tell from their paperwork. However, when I got close to Mobile, Alabama, I stopped at a lady friends of mine to say goodbye and get some rest. As soon as I arrived at her house near Mobile, Alabama, the first thing I did when I arrived was try to call my father, but his phone just rang until his voicemail picked up. I suddenly thought to myself, that's weird because my father always answers my calls, but I just shook it off as my father being extremely tired and getting some rest. But little did I know how far from the truth I was and what was really going on. I fell asleep and woke up at approximately 4 a.m. and got back on the road. And throughout my whole trip to Chicago, as well as throughout the whole weekend, I made multiple attempts to contact my father with all calls going straight to his voicemail. I was getting a little worried and tried contacting my brother's friend, Tony, trying to locate my brother Daniel to find out what was going on, but I could never reach Daniel or Tony never knew who he was. October 21st, 2013 came around and I had to be at Markham Courthouse at 9 a.m. I arrived on time to my court date, anxiously waiting for my name to be called to get a continuance. After my name was called and I was given my next court date, I hurried to my car to retrieve my phone to call my dad to update him on what happened and let him know I would be heading back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. However, when I walked outside the Markham courthouse, as I exited the courthouse doors, my entire body was overcome with what I can only describe as a palpable feeling of dread. I immediately took out running to my vehicle. Once I arrived in my vehicle, I jumped in and grabbed my cell phone. I made a total of 3 attempts to call my father's cell phone. The first 2 attempts to call my father's cell phone went to his voicemail, and on the third and final attempt at calling my father's cell phone, after making dozens of attempts to call my father's cell phone since I left Tuscaloosa, Alabama, a woman answers my father's cell phone on my third attempt to call him. Immediately, I asked the woman, "Who the fuck are you and what are you doing answering my father's cell phone and where's my father?" The woman nervously informs me that she's a nurse. Then she rudely informs me that my father's dead. I went post on the woman, then hung up. I then called my cousin Kurt and informed him what I just learned, only for him to say, "What do you mean your father's dead? We were just with him alive." En route back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, October 22nd, 2013, as I discussed earlier, I received a total of 2 calls from my cousin Kurt. One to confirm that I was heading back, to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and the second call was to inform me that he discovered that my father was placed in restraints. The next call that I received was from my cousin Tony, who stated verbatim, "Hey, big dog, sorry about your loss, but let's just keep this real. Your father sold don't want whenever it's gonna go, but you and your sister need money, so let's just think about the money and burn your father's body." In retrospect, on October 21st, 2013, when my father's phone was answered by the mysterious nurse, informing me that my father was dead, immediately initiating my travels back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, that answered call was an arrogant, unforeseen mistake on their end, and now time was ticking. And after I called Kurt, notifying him what I had learned, and informed him that I would be back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama the next day, now all corporates were shocked that I was heading back so quickly and had to create a false narrative on how my father died, which explains the October 23rd, 2013, 3 a.m. call from my cousin Kurt while I was en route to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, informing me that he had just learned my father was put in restraints. It also explains why my cousin Tony called me an hour later trying to convince me to burn my father's body, because they were both desperately trying to cover their tracks and to get rid of the evidence that was in my father's body. It also explains why all cellular communication to and from my father's cell phone to my cell phone, proving that a nurse answered my dad's cell phone on October 21st, 2013, informing me he was dead, and all other incriminating cellular communication made to and from my cell phone after learning of my father's death, which were made both by my cousins, had been altered to hide the incriminating evidence, which the missing altered cellular phone evidence corroborates and substantiates that there was foul play and that the narrative is false and my father was murdered. Upon further examination of my father's medical records, it strongly appears that my father was given something to aggravate his pre-existing condition, possibly poison, because Dr. Moore knew the exact time and date my father was en route to Tuscaloosa, Alabama DCH ICU, so that Dr. Moore, in advance and in anticipation of his arrival, could admit my father into DCH ICU, having him sign all the necessary documents, so that Dr. Moore could criminally and fraudulently place Nolan Healthcare restraint education documentation within my father's DCH ICU admittance paperwork to be signed by my father September 19, 2013, to later be fraudulently used for justification in putting my father in restraints by Dr. Moore with a sticker date of October 19, 2013 at Nolan Healthcare, which he owned and operated. So after my father called my cell phone October 18, 2013, informing me that he had been transferred to Nolan Hospital, knowing what I know because I was there visiting my father at Nolan Hospital, which is located on the fourth floor of the same building of DCH Hospital, according to the DCH hospital records, or lack thereof, my father was missing for over 24 hours, and in those 24 hours, my father was missing. After I left Tuscaloosa, Alabama, is when my father was killed. I strongly believe my father was murdered between October 18, 2013, the day I left Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and October 19, 2013, because after demanding from Dr. Susan Moore my father's EKG scripts of the day he actually died, Dr. Moore could not and would not provide them to me. However, Dr. Moore signed and dated a Nolan Medical Records release form October 29, 2013 at 16:20, stating that she was unable to find the EKG scripts from October 22, 2013. Not satisfied with Dr. Moore's statement certain foul play existed, I told Dr. Moore that that's not good enough for me. I informed Dr. Moore that only 7 days have passed since my father allegedly died in your care, and you cannot provide to me his son, my father's EKG scripts. Dr. Moore, knowing that I would not take no for an answer, immediately called hospital security to have me escorted out the hospital. After thoroughly reviewing 2,000 pages of fabricated DCH and Nolan Hospital medical records that were given to me by DCH Hospital Medical Records Office, I soon discovered why Dr. Moore would not and could not provide to me my father's EKG scripts for October 22nd, 2013, the day he allegedly died. And that's because they don't exist within the Nolan's medical records that I possess. And that's because my father's last recorded heartbeat on EKG was dated October 19, 2013 at 0703. In supporting evidence that Verizon Wireless and Consumer Cellular were both willing participants in this criminal conspiracy to commit murder, complicit in aiding and abetting the culprits by committing cellular fraud, by tampering and altering incriminating cellular evidence of my father's murder, let's first look at Verizon Wireless cell number 9627216 call logs for the months of September and October 2013. Keeping in mind, as discussed earlier, Supervisor Tracy G. from Verizon Wireless Executive Relations Department, through email, clarified and substantiated exactly what I've been saying for over 9 years. Tracy G specifically stated that through email that cell number 9627216 was not my assigned number until December 1st, 2013. However, according to Verizon Wireless call logs for cell number 9627216, starting September 27, 2013, ironically the same day I arrived at my father's bedside in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, somebody, obviously not me, using cell number 9627216, possibly Jacqueline Ferris, answered an incoming call from Tuscaloosa, Alabama DCH Hospital, September 27, 2013 at 11 a.m. while in Chicago, Illinois. To be crystal clear, even with my Verizon Wireless cell number 7262945, I never received any incoming call from DCH Hospital ever, nor have I ever called or contacted Tuscaloosa, Alabama DCH Hospital or Northern Hospital until after my father's cell phone was answered October 21st, 2013, by a woman informing me that she was a nurse, rudely informing me that my father was dead. After discovering that my father was dead, October 21st, 2013, I returned from Chicago, Illinois to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, October 22nd, 2013, arriving October 23rd, 2013. Approximately October 27, 2013, while trying to obtain my father's DCH and Nolan Hospital medical records, after retrieving everything possible from the medical records office and discovering my father's missing EKG scripts from the day they say he died, is the only time I use my Verizon Wireless cell number 7262945 to contact DCH Hospital trying to locate the missing EKGs. Upon further examination of the Verizon Wireless cell number 9627216 September 2013 call logs, it appears that whoever was utilizing the cell phone connected to 9627216 made over 29 incoming and outgoing cellular calls to my brother Daniel's cell phone 205-826-8784, which his cell phone was located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The cellular communication between both phones began September 27, 2013. And all incoming and outgoing cell phone interaction made from cell number 9627216 starting from September 27, 2013 through October 2nd, 2013 were made while whoever was operating the cell phone was in Chicago, Illinois. When, as discussed earlier, I arrived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, September 27, 2013 at my father's bedside. It also appears that whoever was operating this phone appears to begin traveling from Chicago, Illinois to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, October 2nd, 2013 at 11:33 a.m., arriving in Tuscaloosa, Alabama at 10:38 p.m. October 2nd, 2013, which is 6 days after I already arrived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Then, on the 9627216 October 2013 Verizon Wireless call logs, starting October 4th, 2013, there are over 32 incoming and outgoing calls made to my brother Daniel's cell phone. And as discussed earlier, the only way I ever spoke to my brother Daniel was through my father's cell phone. I never knew Daniel had a cell phone number because Daniel said he didn't have a phone at the time. There are also multiple incoming and outgoing calls to both my cousin Tony and Kurt Littles, which makes no sense because I didn't have the numbers yet, and why would I be communicating with them when that much after the mother tried to kill my father? Also, within the 9627216 Verizon Wireless call logs, DCH Hospital was called October 6, 2013 at 10:40 a.m., and I am adamantly screaming that I have never called DCH Hospital ever until after my father's phone was answered October 21st, 2013, informing me he was dead. And that call was answered from my 7262945 cell number that Verizon Wireless employees fraudulently altered. Upon closer inspection of the call logs, on October 15, 2013, the cell phone attached to cell number 9627216 was making calls from St. Anne's, Illinois, when if they're trying to say this was my my number. How is that even possible if I was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama? Then again, it appears that whoever had this phone started their trip back to Chicago, Illinois, October 16, 2013, and made it to Chicago October 17, 2013, which conflicts with when I left Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which was October 18, 2013. Concerning the Verizon Wireless call logs for cell number 9627216, October 21st, 2013, I had a court date at Markham Courthouse in Markham, Illinois at 9:30 a.m. When I got out of court, I called my father 3 times, and on the third time his phone was answered by an unknown woman informing me very rudely that my father was dead. After learning that my father was dead, I immediately called my cousin Kurt. But according to the 9627216 Verizon Wireless call logs, nothing on any of these call logs reflects any of that. But they made sure to make the call logs match their narrative and medical notes, making it appear as if I called my dad on October 22nd, 2013 at 5:27 at 5:30 when I already knew my father was dead October 21st, 2013. They also made sure to make it appear as if I called both my cousins Kurt and Tony after making it appear I called my father's phone on October 22nd, 2013. They even had cell number 9627216 calling my Aunt Nancy Littles several times to include twice on October 30th, 2013, the day before my father's funeral, when I have never called my aunt in over 30 plus years, and the only time I ever called my Aunt Nancy was to ask her how she was able to withdraw money and close my father's bank account, which after that call is when they issued a warrant for my arrest. Why would I call this evil woman if I knew from day one that she and Dr. Moore were trying to kill my father? And the reason why my 7262945 call logs are missing is because Verizon Wireless and Consumer Cellular, working in collusion with those that conspired to murder my father, agreed to aid and abet the culprits by altering the cell phone database call logs, making the cellular database records so convoluted that no one will be able to piece it together, because this was the incriminating evidence that could never be found to protect the culprits. Because cell number 9627216 was never my cell number until December 1st, 2013, and someone, possibly Jackie, was making multiple cell phone calls with cell number 9627216 to match their narrative of DCH hospital medical records of them communicating with me, which conveniently aligns with Dr. Moore's DCH hospital notes, and to mislead any investigation of foul play involved. If there was ever an outside investigation done. And what's ludicrous is even after Jacqueline Ferris turned off my phone and I opened my own Verizon Wireless account, 572-805-887, her name still appears on the new account. Perhaps the most convincing piece of evidence that I have proving this conspiracy is if Verizon Wireless Supervisor Tracy G stated that I never had cell number 7262945. Then Tracy G continued stated that I didn't have 9627216 until December 1st, 2013. How is it possible within the Verizon Wireless call logs Renee sent me in March of 2022, which not only proved that I had cell number 7262945, but also within the 2013 July and August 7262945 Verizon Wireless call logs, starting July 13, 2013 through August 7, 2013, there are 5 separate cellular phone interactions between my father and I, which beyond a reasonable doubt proves that Verizon Wireless is actively involved within this conspiracy. Next, according to Tracy G, if I didn't have cell number 7262945 ever, and I didn't have 9627216 until December 1st, 2013, can someone please explain to me why both cell numbers appear on my father's October 2013 consumer cellular call log starting October 6, 2013? September 26, 2013, when I left from Chicago, Illinois to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, according to Verizon Wireless call logs, Jacqueline Ferris, using Verizon Wireless cell number 8929690, called my cousin Kurt in Tuscaloosa, Alabama from Chicago, Illinois, September 26, 2013 at 7:43 p.m. Then 6 minutes later, Jacqueline Ferris called DCH Hospital at 7:49 p.m. to notify and verify to my relatives that I was en route to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which the Verizon Wireless call logs proved that Jacqueline Ferris was relaying information to my relatives in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, tracking me September 26, 2013. Simultaneously, my brother Daniel was also tracking me from my father's cell phone, giving my relatives an hourly update on my current location as I was traveling to Tuscaloosa, Alabama from Chicago, Illinois, which explains how my Aunt Nancy Littles, along with Dr. Moore, arrived together 20 minutes after I arrived, absolutely knowing that I had just arrived at my father's hospital room with the sole intentions of trying to get authorization for me to kill my father. You see, I was the monkey wrench in their plan to kill my father. They never factored into their plan that I would arrive. They were certain that I would never show up, and they would be able to inject him with their death shot once my father was admitted into DCH ICU, which me showing up not only surprised them, but now they had to extend their time frame of killing him, and that made them make plenty of mistakes within their fabrication of hospital records and notes. For example, there are multiple notations in the hospital records that make no sense. For example, the timestamps go back in time multiple times if they were trying to cover up their tracks. The most shocking evidence of this crime is that Dr. Susan Margaret Moore is the only doctor whose signature is on my father's admittance paperwork at DCHICU through his discharge from DCHICU. Dr. Moore's signature is also on my father's admittance paperwork into Nolan Healthcare, located on the fourth floor, because she owned it. Dr. Moore then signed off on the restraint order form used to allegedly put my father under physical restraints at 5:15 a.m. October 22nd, 2013. I say allegedly because my father's phone was answered October 21st, 2013, informing me he was already dead. Then, according to the October 22nd, 2013 Nolan Healthcare nurse notes, my father was not checked on by hospital staff October 22nd, 2013, from 08 till 16:30, which is 8.5 hours, my father was left in restraints. Then at 16:30, my father was found dead with vomit in his mouth. Isn't that negligent homicide? Then Dr. Susan Moore writes the Nolan discharge paperwork as well as the cause of death without an autopsy, because in the state of Alabama, the last attending physician can write the cause of death absent of an autopsy. But if my father was already dead October 21st, 2013, then every document to include the death certificate is fraud. And to add insult to injury, Dr. Susan Moore, who was in charge and signed off on every hospital document, could not provide to me my father's EKG scripts of when he died 7 days later, October 29, 2013. And the EKG scripts that I have closest to his murder is dated 10/19/2013 at 7:03 a.m., which is the day after I left when I believe they killed him. Which, in retrospect, explains why my cousin Tony was calling me while I was driving to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the early morning hours of October 23rd, 2013, trying to convince me to burn my father's body because they were desperately trying to get rid of the evidence within my father's body. It also explains why all the cell phone records from my cell number 7262945, corroborating and substantiating in chronological order exactly what I'm saying, are still missing to this day. As to what transpired with the missing author's cell phone records is pretty slick. Knowing they had full access at any time to Jackie's Verizon Wireless account 386-591-070. While I was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, December 1st, 2013, they had Jackie call me to inform me that she was cutting off my cell phone, 7262945. After she cut off my phone, as planned, I contacted Verizon Wireless and opened my own Verizon Wireless account, 572-805-887, only to be giving cell number 962-7216, which just happened to be one of Jackie's previously cell numbers, which enabled the culprits the ability to make it appear as if I had the cell number 962-7216 number beginning September 27, 2013, fraudulently deleting the 7262945 from ever being my number. However, how can that be possible if even Tracy G stated in his email that I wasn't assigned 962-7216 number until December 1st, 2013? To add even more credence of Verizon Wireless cellular fraud, I have several pages of call log comparisons that place cell number 773-962-7216 in Chicago, Illinois, and Tuscaloosa, Alabama simultaneously. And on my father's consumer cellular call logs, both the 7262945 and the 962-7216 numbers both appear October 6, 2013 on the same day and multiple other days, which is impossible. Also, I still have my father's cell phone, and the only number that my father has stored in his contacts for me is the Verizon Wireless 7262945 cell number. In my father's stored contacts, there's no record of a 773-962-7216 ever being my number, nor is there any outgoing or incoming calls to that number. Also, my father's cell phone call history, there are 2 incoming cell phone calls, one from my Aunt Nancy and the other one from Edgar B. Williams, aka Preacher Man, both dated October 21st, 2013, which have been deleted from my father's consumer cellular call logs. In conclusion, I'd like to add a couple more facts that my father left as clues for me. I was with my father for almost a month at Tuscaloosa, Alabama, DCHICU, and not one time did my father mention to me that he had an AARP burial policy and that I was his beneficiary, because my father was protecting me from the dangers that existed in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, because he knew what was going on, which also explains why they were trying to get permission for me to kill him, and why they were trying to get me to burn my father's body, because after everything, they didn't have control of that. However, even though I was my father's beneficiary, my Aunt Nancy Littles was still in control of everything. I was never allowed or given an option to perform an autopsy on my father, and my Aunt Nancy buried my father on October 31st, 2013, Halloween. In all my existence, I have never heard of anyone being buried on Halloween, and I, being Larry Brantley Jr., his firstborn son, would never bury my father on Halloween. I wouldn't even bury my enemy on Halloween. At my father's burial, Reverend Kelvin Cochran, who I've never met or spoken to ever, After my brother and I spoke at my father's burial, through divine intervention, Reverend Cochran said he used to be a drug addict. He said he was in the army for 9 years, and his family tried to steal his land too. After Reverend Cochran spoke, my cousins Tony and Kurt, who were the pallbearers, did not touch the casket after the service. With all conspiracies, with all conspiracies of this nature, one would have to follow the money. My grandmother's estate was literally 3 miles from the University of Alabama Roll Tide Stadium. According to documents I found on the internet, the economic and physical impact the University of Alabama provided to the state of Alabama for the 2013-2014 fiscal year were 2.51 billion. The University of Alabama is also sponsored by Mercedes-Benz and has multiple ventures with Mercedes-Benz. Keeping in mind, University of Alabama lawyers fraudulently prepared documents presenting them to courts for my Aunt Nancy's, and Mercedes-Benz has a storage facility behind the estate. After everything I had presented to Tuscaloosa, Alabama law enforcement, literally begging them for years for a proper and thorough investigation, with tangible documents in hand and incriminating cell phone records that could have been subpoenaed. Also informing them that Jack Gibson, the director of clinical services at Nola Hospital, commented to me, "You better go back to Chicago and make a lot of money, and even then you'll never get the EKG for your father." They even stole my father's guns from me, and that wasn't even investigated. However, instead of investigating my father's murder, Tuscaloosa, Alabama law enforcement decided to issue a warrant out for my arrest based off my Aunt Nancy filing a false police report, fraudulently stating that I said I was going to kill her. And without any evidence to substantiate the charge, they issued a warrant for my arrest. I was arrested, bonded out, and went to court in Tuscaloosa, Alabama from Chicago, Illinois for a year. After going back and forth to court, I got a chance to review the evidence the state's attorney said they had against me, which was no evidence at all. I then demanded jury trial. After demanding jury trial, they gave me back my bond money. Then they transferred the case to another courthouse, and for 4 years the case disappeared, only to be resent back to the original court. Then they issued an outstanding warrant for my arrest in hopes that I return to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, so they can lock me up and later discover me hanging in a cell. I hope that all my fellow Marine veterans, military veterans, as well as my civilian friends can help me go viral to bring attention and a proper investigation to this atrocious premeditated conspiracy to commit murder against my father, and to also recover the missing call logs from my cell number 773-726-2945, which is the missing key evidence and corroborates my accusations of the murderous plan that includes cellular fraud and federal civil rights violations against my father, because it's hard for me to sleep at night knowing that my father can't rest well because he has no justice due to the magnitude of this conspiracy to commit murder against him and the public corruption that is keeping it hidden. Also, out of respect for my honorable service as a United States Marine, and out of respect for my father, who was a Chicagoan, born and raised in Chicago, I am demanding that the Department of Justice order a special prosecutor, preferably black from Chicago, to investigate this conspiracy, to not only bring justice for my father and possibly my grandmother's murder, but to seek retribution for all the atrocities that people of color have suffered and endured throughout the state of Alabama and at the hands of the Good Old Boy program, which has been going on way too long. Justice for my father, Larry Brownlee Sr.